The day my brother got married was the day my mother held up a document in front of 47 people and read my net worth out loud, like she was announcing a lottery winner. I still hear it sometimes, that pause before she said the number. The way the room went quiet in that particular way. Rooms do when something has shifted and everyone knows it, but no one wants to be the first to acknowledge it. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start where it actually started, which was not at the wedding at all. It started the summer I turned 9, in a kitchen that smelled like burnt coffee and unspoken resentment. The morning my parents sat me down and told me my little brother needed special tutoring and that I was going to need to be their big girl from now on. I learned early what being the big girl meant. It meant my school recitals were the ones they missed. It meant my report cards got a nod and a fridge magnet while his math test scores got a phone call to Grandma. It meant that when I got into the honors program in 7th grade, my mother said, "That's great, honey," and then immediately turned to ask my brother if he'd finished his homework yet. He was 9. She was more worried about his 3rd grade homework than my academic achievement. I don't say any of this to sound bitter. I say it because it's the ground everything else grew out of. By the time I was in high school, I had learned to be invisible in my own house, not in a dramatic, cinematic way, just quietly, practically invisible. I did my homework at the library. I got a part-time job at 16 without telling anyone, mostly because I knew there would be no commentary, no objection, no praise. There would be nothing, which was somehow worse than all three. I paid for my own SAT prep. I applied to colleges without asking for help. I got into a school 400 miles away, and I packed my own boxes the weekend before I left. My mother made a big breakfast that morning, which I think was her version of a send-off. My father shook my hand. My brother was still asleep. College was the first time in my life I felt like a full person, like I was allowed to take up space. I studied finance, which people thought was boring, and I thought was fascinating. Numbers made sense to me in a way people didn't. Numbers didn't play favorites. I graduated, moved to a city where I didn't know anyone, and started building something from zero. I was good at my job, more than good. I was methodical and patient in a way that most people in my field weren't, because I'd been practicing patience my entire life. By 27, I had paid off my student loans. By 29, I had a real investment portfolio. By 31, I had quietly, carefully, without telling a single person in my family, accumulated enough to change the entire trajectory of my life. I lived modestly, not because I had to, but because I genuinely didn't need much. A clean apartment, good coffee, a few close friends who didn't know the details of my finances because I had learned a long time ago that money changes how people see you, and I wanted to be seen first. I went home for holidays when I could, which wasn't often. Every visit confirmed what I already knew. Nothing had changed. My brother was still the sun that everything orbited. He'd stumbled through 2 years of community college, switched majors 3 times, and eventually landed a job at a logistics company through a friend of my father's. My parents described this as him finding his footing, which is the version of the story I heard at every family dinner. No one ever used words like footing about me. I had simply always been footed, apparently. Then he met her. Her name was Sinclair, and she was pretty and loud, and wore a lot of bracelets that jangled when she moved. My brother lit up around her in a way I hadn't seen him light up around much of anything. I was genuinely happy for him. I want to be clear about that. I was happy for him. The engagement was announced at Christmas 2 years ago. My mother called me in the morning before I'd had my first cup of coffee. "Your brother's getting married," she said, and I could hear that specific brightness in her voice, the one she reserved for him, and I said, "That's wonderful, Mom," and I meant it. The wedding was planned for late May, a Saturday, a venue outside the city, one of those converted barn situations with string lights and a wooden arch and a guest list that eventually grew to nearly 50 people. My parents handled most of the planning with Sinclair's family. I sent a card when they got engaged. I confirmed my attendance 3 months out. I bought a dress. I drove up the Thursday before because my mother asked me to help with some of the setup, and I thought it would be a good chance to spend some real time with the family. I was feeling something close to optimism, which in hindsight I should have recognized as a warning sign. Thursday was fine. Friday was fine. I helped fold programs. I carried boxes. I answer questions about centerpieces with opinions I didn't actually have. My father grilled steaks that night, and for a few hours it felt almost like the version of family I'd always wanted. Everyone in the same place, working toward the same thing, nobody keeping score. I left my cardigan in the main house when I went to sleep in the guest house that night. My portfolio statement, a quarterly summary from my financial advisor, was in the inside pocket of that cardigan. I didn't think about it. Why would I? The ceremony was beautiful. Sinclair cried. My brother cried, which surprised me in the best possible way. I sat in the third row and felt my throat tighten when they said their vows, because despite everything, he was my little brother, and I had carried him in the corner of my heart, his whole life, even when that corner was bruised. The reception started at 4. By 5:30, people had loosened up, the dancing had started, and I was standing near the bar with a glass of sparkling water, talking to one of Sinclair's aunts about nothing in particular, when I noticed my mother moving through the crowd with a piece of paper in her hand. I noticed it the way you notice a small weather change, not alarming yet, just a shift in pressure. She was looking for me. I could tell by the way her eyes swept the room with that particular focus. I raised my hand slightly to catch her attention, and she changed direction. I found this, she said, and she held out the paper, and I recognized it immediately. The quarterly statement, my cardigan. Mom, I said, reaching for it. She pulled it back slightly. Not much, just enough. Is this real? She asked. The music was still playing. People were still dancing. Sinclair's aunt had drifted away during the handoff, sensing something private. We can talk about this later, I said. I kept my voice even. I was very good at keeping my voice even. Is this real? She asked again, and her voice had changed. It had gotten louder. Not yelling, not yet, but louder in the way that carries. My father appeared at her shoulder. He looked at the paper. He looked at me. Where did this come from? He said. And then, before I could answer either of them, before I could steer this somewhere private and manageable, my mother looked down at the paper in her hand, and she read the number out loud. The number had a comma in it, more than one comma. The music kept playing. About 4 or 5 people nearby went still. I watched it ripple outward, the way silence spreads through a crowd. One person noticing, then the person beside them, then the cluster at the table closest to us. My brother had stopped dancing. He was looking at me from across the room with an expression I couldn't entirely read. That's your account, my father said, quietly now, dangerously quietly. Dad? How long? My mother had folded the paper once, twice, the way people do when they're not sure what to do with their hands. How long have you had this? She asked. How long have you been hiding this? I want to tell you there was a version of this where I stayed calm enough to explain everything in the right order. The years of work, the methodical saving, the investments that paid off, the life I had built quietly and alone, without anyone's help, without a single phone call asking how I was doing or whether I needed anything. I want to tell you I said all of that clearly, and it landed. That is not what happened. What happened was that my mother said, loud enough now that the music felt like background noise, your brother is just starting his life. They're going to need help. You have more than enough. Not congratulations. Not how'd you do this? Not I didn't know you were struggling or thriving or anything at all. Just you have more than enough, and your brother needs some of it. My father nodded like this was a reasonable thing to say at a wedding reception in front of 47 people. I looked at my brother. He wasn't disagreeing. His new wife, Sinclair, who I had liked until about 30 seconds ago, said, "We've been so stressed about the down payment." I felt something leave me in that moment, not dramatically, not in a way I could have pointed to and said, "There, that's the moment." It was quieter than that, like a door closing in a room no one was using anyway. "This is my brother's wedding," I said. My voice was very steady. I was surprised by how steady it was. "I'm not doing this here." "Then when?" my mother asked. "You're never home. You never call. We had no idea you." "That's not true," I said. "You had no idea because you never asked." She blinked. My father looked at the ground. I tipped the statement from my mother's hand, folded it once and put it in my dress pocket. Said to no one in particular and everyone present, "I'm very happy for you both." And I walked back inside. I sat in the bathroom for 11 minutes. I know it was 11 because I was staring at my phone and watching the time change and doing the math on what had just happened. My brother knocked on the door at some point, said my name. I said, "I just need a minute." He said, "I didn't know she was going to do that." I said, "I know." There was a pause. Then he said, "But you really, that's a lot of money." And there it was. There was the thing I had known was coming, the thing I had felt forming in the room like a weather system. And I had hoped, foolishly, that my brother would be different, that he would knock on this door and say something that surprised me, that after 30-some years of being the sun that everything orbited, he would for once look across the room and see me, really see me, and say something that had nothing to do with what I could give him. "Yeah," I said, "it is." I heard him shift his weight outside the door. "Mom's not wrong that we've had a hard year," he said. "I know," I said, and I did know. I had heard about his hard year. I had heard about it in a Christmas phone call that lasted 9 minutes, because that was how much time my family had for my voice. "Okay," he said finally. I hope you'll think about it." I listened to his footsteps move back toward the music. I looked at myself in the mirror for a long time, not in a self-pity way, more like an inventory. This is who you are. This is what you have built. This is the room you are standing in. I went back out. I finished the evening. I danced once with my father, who did not bring up the money again that night, though I could see him composing something every time he looked at me. I hugged Sinclair. I hugged my brother, and I meant it, because I have always meant it, and that is both my curse and my integrity. I drove home Sunday morning before anyone else was awake. The call started Monday. My mother, twice. My father once. A number I didn't recognize that turned out to be an aunt on my father's side. I had spoken to approximately 4 times in my adult life. She said she'd heard about the situation and just wanted to reach out. I let it go to voicemail. My mother's first message was about family, about how money doesn't have to change things, about how she and my father had always done their best, and she hoped I could see that. Her second message was more direct. My brother and Sinclair were looking at a house. The down payment was $40,000. She said she wasn't asking for all of it. Just help. Just a little help. "You have so much," she said at the end, and her voice broke slightly in a way that I recognized from childhood as the precursor to something being my fault. I sat with those messages for 3 days. I thought about the part-time job at 16 that nobody noticed, the boxes I packed alone, the silence when I got into the honors program, the 9-minute phone call that was supposed to cover an entire year. I thought about the word help, how I had spent my whole life trying to earn it and never once been given it, and now it was being reframed as something I owed. I thought about my brother outside the bathroom door, saying, "I hope you'll think about it," not "I'm sorry this happened," not "I should have said something," not "Are you okay?" Just "I hope you'll think about it," as though the only relevant fact about me in that moment was my bank balance. I wrote a letter, not an email, a letter on paper, printed out and mailed, because I wanted it to feel real in the way digital things don't. I said that I loved my family. I said that I was genuinely happy my brother had found someone to build a life with. I said that I was not going to provide financial assistance for their down payment or for anything else at this time, and that I was not going to explain or justify that decision further. I said one more thing, which I had been carrying in my chest for so long that writing it down felt like setting down a bag I hadn't realized I was still holding. I spent 20 years watching you pour your energy into someone who needed it and withhold it from someone who needed it too. I don't say that to punish anyone. I say it because I think we all deserve to understand what actually happened in that house, instead of the version where I'm simply the one who won't share. I sealed the envelope. I mailed it. I didn't hear back for 2 weeks. Then my father called, and his message was different from my mother's. Quieter, shorter. He said he'd gotten the letter. He said he wanted to talk when I was ready. He didn't say I was wrong. "I'm not ready yet. I might be someday." My brother texted me a week after the letter arrived. Just, "I hear you. I'm sorry. I need some time too." I read it 6 times. It wasn't everything, but it wasn't nothing either. I texted back, "Okay, I'm here." And then I put my phone down and I looked out the window at my city, at the specific piece of sky I'd bought for myself through 10 years of invisible work, and I let myself feel something I didn't have a clean word for. Not happiness, exactly. Not relief, exactly. But something closer to the feeling of finally walking upright after years of learning to make yourself small. My apartment is quiet in the mornings. That's the thing I love most about it. I have a window that faces east, and I drink my coffee there before the city fully wakes up, and there is no one in that silence who needs anything from me. There is no ledger being kept. There is no older sister sitting across a breakfast table, being quietly taught that her job is to disappear. I am 33 years old. I built something real from nothing, with no one watching and no one asking, which means I built it entirely for myself. There is something clarifying about that. Something I didn't know how to appreciate until a piece of paper got left in a cardigan pocket at a wedding where I thought, for just a few hours, that I might finally get to be part of something. I was part of something. It just took a while to understand which part. There's a version of this story where I'm the villain. I know that. I've sat with it long enough to understand that's how it looks from the outside. A woman with more money than her family has ever seen, refusing to share any of it, walking away from her brother's wedding with her jaw set and her heart closed. I get it, that version is simpler. But here's what I've learned about simple versions. They always leave out the decade before the moment. They always start at the number. What I did with those 10 years, the saving, the patience, the learning to read risk and reward, the choosing of discipline over comfort over and over again, in a city where no one knew my name, that didn't happen by accident. It happened because I made a decision early on that I was going to build something real, even if no one was watching, especially if no one was watching. There is a kind of integrity in that, in doing the right work when the audience is empty. I didn't know it would amount to what it did. I just knew that the work itself was worth doing, and that I would rather build something honest and invisible than something impressive and hollow. That's the first thing I'd want anyone to take from this. Not the money, the discipline to keep going when nothing is being handed to you and nobody is asking how you're doing. It doesn't look like strength from the outside. It just looks like absence, but it is the quietest and most durable kind of strength there is. The second thing is harder to say. My mother read that number out loud, and her first instinct was redistribution, not recognition, and I spent a long time being angry about that before I understood that it wasn't really about me at all. It was about a story she'd been telling herself for 30 years, a story where resources flow toward the one who needs them most, where the capable one absorbs the cost so the struggling one doesn't have to. She wasn't being cruel. She was being consistent. Consistently wrong, but consistent. Understanding that didn't mean accepting it. I want to be clear about that distinction. Understanding why someone does what they do is not the same as agreeing to absorb the consequences forever. I could see my mother clearly and still write that letter. I could love my brother and still say no. Those things aren't contradictions. They're what it looks like when you finally thought it through instead of just reacting. The letter was the hardest thing I've ever written. Harder than any financial model, harder than any negotiation. Because I wasn't just telling them no, I was telling them the truth, which is a different and more expensive thing. I said what actually happened in that house. I named the pattern. I did it without cruelty, or at least I tried to, but I did it clearly. There's no partial credit in honesty. You either say the real thing or you don't. And then I mailed it and I let go of what happened next. That's the part people don't talk about enough. You can do everything right. The work, the clarity, the courage to tell the truth, and still not control the outcome. My father called. My brother texted something small and genuine. My mother has not responded. The story is still unfolding in ways I can't manage. All I can do is keep being the person who made those choices and trust that the choices were worth making regardless of what comes back. I stand at my window most mornings and I think about the 9-year-old who learned to fold herself down to nothing. I think about what it cost her and what she built out of that cost, and how strange and full life gets when you finally stop apologizing for taking up space. She deserved better then. She is doing better now. That's not nothing, that's in fact everything.